Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Cincinnati Reds. We are exactly at the midway point of the 2024 season, and the Reds are 45-36 through 81 games. We are first in the NL Central, and if the season were to end today, we would actually have home field advantage for the first round of the playoffs and a first round bye with the second best record in the National League. But all is not perfectly well because we are also only a game and a half away from being out of a wild card spot. So the NL Central is incredibly tight and the wild card race in the National League is incredibly tight. And we are one of many teams fighting for playoff spots in the National League. That said, it still has definitely been an improvement from our first season with the Reds in 2023 when we were a 77-win team. Ownership's goal this year was just for us to not suck completely this season. So the fact that we're going to hopefully improve on that 77-win season with a winning record at the very least, and hopefully also compete for and eventually get into a playoff spot, should represent some pretty significant progress in terms of what we want to do with this team. Do have a few injuries right now of note. Hunter Green, still 4 or 5 weeks away. He's missed the entire season. Aaron Nola, who was our big free agent acquisition this past offseason, needed elbow ligament reconstruction surgery after hurting himself in spring training. Obviously out for this year. The question is what he's going to look like when he gets back. We did front load his contract a bit. He was due to make 33 this season and is making 33 this season. You can see those numbers will start coming down a bit. But obviously if he is significantly impacted by this surgery, it's going to be a very negative thing for this Reds franchise. And then Christian Encarnacion Strand, the young third baseman, still out for about 2 weeks. And Nick Ahmed, who we signed relatively late. He was on the market even in February. You can see we signed him on February 9th. And brought him on board for less than $6 million a year for the next 3 years, team option in the third season for us. Excellent defensive shortstop who has taken over at that position for us. Moved Kevin Newman into more of a utility role, although he's been playing starting shortstop more recently since Ahmed went down. So that's where we stand. It's July 6th right now, heading to the All-Star break shortly, and we have the draft coming up in just 5 days. The Reds are going to have the number 4 pick overall. Appreciate those of you who shared thoughts on what we should do with that pick in the comments section for our past episode. Generally, the main comment was this draft stinks. It's a horrible one to have a number 4 overall pick in. And I do tend to agree with you. Hopefully one of the top couple of players will end up falling to us at number 4, but it is definitely not the most impressive draft that I've ever looked at. Also got some good suggestions about potential trades and wanted to show something that I put together at the end of our last episode, or actually more following the end of our last episode, when I started thinking about who was on the trade market. And we need some pitching help. And when you look at the top pitchers available, Corbin Burnes is available. So we have made an offer for him. He's in the final year of his contract with the Blue Jays. They picked him up in a trade just 5 months ago, and they've already got him on the trade market again. He could definitely help our team replace a lot of what we thought we were going to have this year with Nola. Would be a relatively expensive rental to bring him on board. We made an offer of Jesus Conchola, who was one of our international amateur free agent signings this past year, a pretty good prospect. and then another corner outfielder in, I can't remember his first name, Serta, one of the better prospects in the red system, but not like a top prospect. You see Canchola listed on our prospect list, and Serta's not even listed as one of the top prospects anymore. But he's actually got decent potential. I don't know that they're going to go for this deal, particularly because we needed them to retain a good chunk of his contract. We put it at 40%. I think technically with the amount of money we have, we may have only needed them to retain like 30% to get it done. But I was trying to leave ourselves some optionality in the event that the trade does go through. We'll find out what the reaction is. But I do think that potentially moving on from some of the corner outfielders in our organization, as well as some of the infield depth that we have. Jonathan India was an all-star for us last year. He's had just 134 at-bats this year since we've turned him into more of a utility player for us. With the fact that we made the trade for Ryan Mountcastle, who's actually played about a similar amount of time. And we brought on, obviously, Ahmed, who I mentioned. Right now we've got Matt McClain up. We've got Jose Barrero up. And we still have Ellie De La Cruz, who's really an infielder, but we're just started training him to play outfield. He's more than ready to come into the majors. And Nelvi Marte, another guy that we're just trying to train for a different position at this point, but is basically ready to contribute at the major league level at this point too. So certainly think that we have some talent that we would conceivably include in a trade if we're able to bring a big-time pitcher on board. Do I think this is a World Series championship team? No. But if you get into the playoffs, you never know what could happen. And I think adding another frontline starter could definitely help ensure that at the very least, these 2024 Cincinnati Reds will get into the playoffs. And not surprising, the Blue Jays said no way to that offer. Canchola, just to look at him, pretty decent prospect. As I mentioned, we signed him. He was a relatively young international amateur free agent this February. So he's already in rookie ball for us at the age of 18, hitting just a $169. But certainly if he's able to completely develop, has a bat that would be useful at the major league level. And then Alan Serta, Alan is his name, playing in AAA this year, hitting .238 with 9 homers, but did hit 21 homers in AA last year. Potentially plus power, potentially an excellent eye to draw a lot of walks. The issues with him are his making contact and the number of strikeouts that he's going to have. Clearly didn't think that would get the deal done, but was hoping that they might at least come back with something to talk about. We're going to continue to, sim through the month of July here. Don't think we're going to approach them right away. Want to kind of see more how things evolve over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully at that point, we may be able to find a few more players on the trading block. Right now, certainly Burns stands out as far and away the best starting pitcher who's available. So the price for him is going to be pretty high. But he's obviously also, the biggest potential difference maker out there. We certainly could go and try to make a trade for somebody who's not on the trade block as well. So there's a lot of options, and we've still got over 3 weeks until we're going to get to the trade deadline. So I think right now we kind of pivot our attention to the draft. I am going to, though, at least add in some team needs, which you can see I haven't even done anything here with Cincinnati yet. Always going to be on the lookout for a starting pitcher, though, especially a young starting pitcher. Actually, we won't even put an age limit on it. We just want some with a minimum quality of good. And hopefully people will start shopping us some good starting pitchers or starting pitcher prospects randomly. Probably going to have to pay a lot for them, but at least the people and the other general managers know now that we are looking for a starter. Should have obviously done that a long time ago. Some of you have rightly noted that with me knowing that I'm not going to be playing these Reds for months in real time, I probably cut a few corners, so apologize for that. I'm trying to take this as seriously as possible, but I definitely kind of enjoying just kind of forcing myself to play through it quickly and put out an episode every day as well. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to keep this pace up. At some point, it could cost me my job and or my marriage and or my children. But right now, I'm somewhat balancing all of those things with still putting out an episode a day over the last few weeks. So we'll continue running with that as long as we can. And we've made it to draft day. You can see it's noted that we will have the fourth pick in the draft. Rock Riggio, Matthew Valley, Peyton Stovall, Connor Griffin, Derek Curiel, Ty Southseen, Bryce Rainier, Tommy White, Drew Downs, and Kyle Tako are the top 10 prospects according to the OOTP Scouting Association. You can see our record is dipped to 47-39. We are now a game and a half behind in the division. We are still up one on the wild card at this point, but it's obviously going to be extremely volatile. As you can see here, there are 6 teams separated by 2 games for the wild card spots. And there's also teams like the Diamondbacks, Cubs, Rockies, Padres, even the Nationals kind of lurking. Quite honestly, it looks like only the Marlins and the Pirates are really out of it here on July 11th. As I mentioned, we're the 4th pick overall behind the Nationals, the Rockies, and the Marlins. We did benefit. We moved up from number 8 to number 4 in the lottery last winter, so that was positive. But it is a pretty weak draft. Rock Riggio, we mentioned, viewed as one of the better prospects. Doubt that he will be around when we're picking at number 4. Connor Griffin, the right fielder, is another guy that we would definitely like. Don't know whether he will be around with the 4th pick either. But after that, particularly in the offensive players, it drops off pretty quickly. You can see we only see, according to our scout, about 15 3-star or higher potential everyday players. You look at the guy that our scout figures is the number 3 prospect among all of the position players, Drew Downs. And quite honestly, if he completely develops, he's a 4th outfielder on a good team, maybe a borderline starting corner outfielder. And this is the guy who, according to our scout, is the consensus number 3 prospect in the draft, a guy that conceivably could be on the board for us at number 4 and in the mix for us to make as a pick. So pretty weak draft. If you've played a lot of seasons in the new version, OOTP 24, would love to know what you're seeing in the draft in the comments section. I haven't played a ton of seasons right now. This is my 2nd season with Kansas City. I played 3 seasons with the Yankees in my first YouTube series of the new version of the game. And then I've also just kind of messed around on my own, playing a few seasons here and there that were not made into videos. So I've maybe played, 8 or 9 seasons, but I've never gotten further than 3 or 4 seasons into the future. But to me, the depth and the quality of the drafts, at least in the first few years of the game, definitely appears to be lacking. But very anecdotal, very small sample size. So if you have thoughts on what the drafts have looked like, particularly if you've simmed out to 2027, 2028, 2029, would love to know what you're seeing on that front. And with that, we will get the draft started. As I said, I'd love to see a Connor Griffin or a Rock Riggio there at the number 4 pick for us to have a chance to take. Obviously, I'm going to dig deeper on a lot of players before making a decision and also see what my scout has to say. But right now, might as well just see what the next pick is for the Washington Nationals. And Rock Riggio looks like he is gone. Yep, so one player that I was interested in off the board, Colorado, Connor Griffin gone. So I had the top two players kind of picked. Not that that was a real bold prediction given what our scout thought. See who Miami takes. And who did they go with? Shortstop Josh Rivera. So the number 4 pick is up. Got to spend a little time scouting things out, and I'll kind of let you know who I think the 3 or 4 or 5 most interesting prospects are, and what I decide to do. Obviously, always interested in hearing after I kind of dig through those top handful of prospects in my eyes and let you know what I decide to do. Always interested in hearing which direction you would have gone in and why, particularly if it's a different decision than the one that I made. And before we find out who my scout recommends, which I'm guessing will probably be Drew Downs, just in terms of the ratings he has, we'll take a look at the 6 position players and the 1 pitcher that I think stand out a bit above the rest of the options. Third baseman Henry Allen, don't love his fielding. He's 6'1", so he can become a first baseman. Don't think I'd want to play him in the outfield with that range. Like his good work ethic and with plus contact and plus home run power. Could be a useful hitter, but for a 4th pick overall, he's not incredibly exciting. Theo Gillen, shortstop, has the versatility to play just about anywhere in the infield. Probably in terms of those ratings, feel better with him at third base than I would at short. Certainly would like a little bit better arm at third, but he could be a pretty good defensive third baseman. He could play short second. Obviously would be really good at first. Can also play, anywhere in the outfield. You wouldn't love to play him in center field. Has a decent amount of speed. Question is the bat. Not going to have a ton of home run power. Not going to have the best eye in the world. But that defensive versatility with a respectable bat potentially has at least a little bit of value. Andre Modugno, another third base prospect, a little bit better than the other third baseman we looked at in terms of his arm at least. A not dissimilar batting profile, not quite the same contact rating, but a decent prospect. Center fielder Michael Mullinax can basically play anywhere in the outfield. Could have a slightly above average bat if everything develops. Could be useful on the base paths. Decent prospect. Another shortstop, Trey Snyder, can play anywhere in the infield, but really not a great fielder anywhere in the infield. Do love the high work ethic and adaptability, decent speed, and looks like, again, a average-ish overall type of batting profile unless he completely develops. Peyton Stovall, first base, a college player, like the high leadership, adaptability, and work ethic. He's pretty close to being major league ready at this point. We have a ton of corner infielders already in our system, so I don't know that we want to be adding someone who's going to be ready to play a position like that in very short order. I think I had mentioned that I was going to look at 6 position players, but I think it was Will Taylor that I had forgotten about. Yeah, I really like his glove, really like his speed. Question with him is how good his bat is really going to be. Likely going to have below average home run power, but the rest of it's not too bad. I'd feel better about the speed and the base running skills and the stealing all being really good if he had a little more gap power to take advantage of some of that speed. Unfortunately, not likely the case. So those are the hitting prospects. The one pitching prospect, the top pitching prospect according to our scout, the only 3-star potential pitching prospect in the entire draft. Joshua Hod, older high school player, 19 years old. If he completely develops, his stuff and his control are a little better than average. His movement is well above average, which will be important because he's a fly ball pitcher and he's only throwing in the low 90s. So you want to try to avoid the home runs, particularly in Great American Ballpark. The thing that I do like about him, he's basically got 3 major league pitches at this point. His fastball, his curve, and his changeup are all at major league average. The curveball is a little below. When you look at the OSA ratings, pretty similar profile. They think he's got a little more upside with his stuff. I don't love that he's looking for $11 million, so that'll definitely be over slot here for the 4th pick in the draft. But he has the stamina to start, decent at holding runners. Definitely intrigued by him. I think worst case scenario, even if he doesn't develop a ton from here, which hopefully he still will at only 19, he's a 5th starter in the majors. If he completely develops, he could be a very respectable number 3, maybe even a number 2 if we get a little talent change randomness and good coaching in the minors in our favor. So I'm definitely leaning towards Hod over any of the position players simply because I think when we pick in the 2nd round, I would think that one of the 6 or 7 position players that I mentioned will still be around, whereas Hod being the top pitching prospect in a very weak pitching draft, hard to imagine that he's going to be around. Now he is only 5'9" and $155 as far as his weight, so he's a small righty, generally not a profile that teams would typically be excited to draft, especially when the guy's looking for $11 million. But I think that's the direction I'm leaning. But before we make a decision, let's see what our scouting director recommends. And he recommends the high school shortstop Trey Snyder. He's definitely not horrible. Pretty well balanced. He's not a shortstop at the major league level, but as we talked about, he can play anywhere in the infield. He could play left field if you needed him to. Hopefully with the good work ethic, he's going to develop as close to fully as possible, but he's also almost 19 years old. I don't hate him as a prospect. Obviously, he was one of the guys that I mentioned, but I just think by position scarcity and just kind of thinking about relative value, there's no way that Joshua Hod is going to be around from now when the Reds pick again in the 2nd round. Whereas I'm willing to bet that between Allen, Gillen, Modugno, Mullinax, Snyder, Stovall, and Will Taylor, I think one of those guys is still going to be around, and I don't have such a strong opinion on any of them, even though I do like Trey Snyder, that I'm willing to let the pitcher go. So we're going to go with Joshua Hod here, the expensive player, with the 4th pick in the draft. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Let me know what you would have done. We'll auto-draft until our next pick. And let's take a look right at the top batters, see if I was right that at least one of those 7 would still be available. Henry Allen's still there, and Trey Snyder, who our scout wanted us to take, is still there. So got a couple options. Let's see what our scouting director recommends. I'm assuming it's still got to be Trey Snyder if he wanted us to take him in the 1st round. No, now he's pivoted to Henry Allen. Well, he's right. We're going to take one of those guys, but a little bit inconsistent. I would say that I'm going to go and look back through their ratings again to remind myself. The one thing that Henry Allen does have going for him, he's only looking for $650,000, while Trey Snyder's looking for $5 million. Given that we just are going to be spending around $11 million on our 1st round pick, most likely, getting a second round pick well below slot would not be the worst thing in the world for us. We talked about Snyder not too long ago. Looks like he can be a competent player at any infield position with a competent major league bat, a competent amount of speed, good personality that ensures he's going to develop. The ceiling for him is probably a respectable major league starter, but the floor for him is probably a respectable utility player who plays in the majors for 7 or 8 seasons. So I don't think there's a ton of volatility around what Trey Snyder will become with that good work ethic, but unless our scout is completely wrong, don't see a ton of upside. Clearly the OOTP Scouting Association sees more potential with him. I'm willing to think that our scout is probably going to be more right than wrong in most times when there's a debate between him and the OOTP scouts. And Henry Allen, another guy with high work ethic, high adaptability, just not a particularly adept defensive player. He's listed as a third baseman at 6'1" with those ratings, would want to make him a first baseman. And really, he's a first baseman or a DH. Don't want that 35 range out in the outfield. So he's certainly limited in terms of what he can give defensively. The contact, gap power, and home run power, 60, 55, 65, and then a little below average with the eye and the avoid Ks. So 60, 55, 65. So the clear difference, and the only difference, is that the third baseman potentially is a well above average home run hitter, while Trey Snyder is average at best. Trey Snyder a little better with his eye, a little better at avoiding strikeouts. And then the contact and gap power, at least in terms of their potential value according to our scout, is identical. Taking a look at how the OOTP Scouting Association thinks about Henry Allen, they're a little more mixed on him. They still see the contact and the home run power, but they don't put a lot of stock in that gap power. Not particularly important one way or another with the below average speed, but I think in a perfect world, and you can see there's a lot of guys that, the OOTP Scouting Association sees huge potential for that our scout hasn't even mentioned. Jackson Nicholas looks like a potential really good offensive player who's college guy who's pretty developed when you look at the OOTP Scouting Association ratings. When we turn it down to our scout, he's going to have a little bit of home run power potentially. But with the low leadership, low work ethic, not a guy that I'd pick right now. Go back to the OOTP ratings just to look at Landon O'Donnell, also third baseman. Wow, that's a weird profile. Massive contact and massive home run power with almost no gap power. Interestingly, he doesn't strike out an insane amount of time. Kind of an odd profile that someone would have contact that's almost off the charts, home run power that's essentially could be off the charts, but so little gap power. Taking a look at what our scout thinks, though, a very different situation. The home run power is the only thing that he thinks could be above average. Another guy with low work ethic. So those are two guys that we certainly wouldn't chase after. I think in a perfect situation, I would go with Trey Snyder very marginally over Henry Allen. But given that we're already going to be on the hook for probably $11 million to get Joshua Hod signed, and the fact that we've only budgeted $12 million in the draft budget, and given the fact that our total money available is only about $3 million, and I would like to make a trade and potentially bring on a talented player to help us get into the playoffs this year, I've got to at least be cognizant of the amount of money that we're going to be spending on our draftees. And so because of that, we are going to follow our scouting director's recommendation, bring on Henry Allen, because with that $650,000 bonus demand, that's going to fit a lot better in our budget for this season. And our next pick is now in the 4th round. We lost our 3rd round pick for bringing Aaron Nola on board. Trey Snyder's still out there. If it was a 3rd round pick and we were going to get a potential draft pick next year, if we didn't get him signed, I would think about bringing him on board just in case we end up making some wacky trade that takes some salary off of the books for us. Maybe there would be a way to sneak him in. But as a 4th rounder, we won't get compensation if we don't sign him. So I'm going to go for the shortstop, Adrian Jimenez. He's only looking for $75,000. High work ethic, high leadership, not a great defensive player, probably a second baseman more than anything in the infield, even though that's the one position that he hasn't really practiced at. The bat is probably not ever going to be a big-time major league bat, but as I mentioned, not looking for a ton of money, got some good personality traits. We will bring him on board here when I get to the right screen to actually continue the draft. Well, we'll see who the scouting director recommends. He recommends Joey Oakey, starting pitcher. Not a horrible prospect. I tend to try to avoid guys with poor work ethic. Everything's going to have to work out perfectly for him to be a useful major league starter. And best case scenario is kind of a 5th starter, given the low leadership and low work ethic. Don't think he's going to make it. So we're going to stick with the budget plan and go with Jimenez here in the 4th round. So we ended up in decent financial position after the draft. Obviously, Hod is going to be a big offer, but the other 3 players that we took in the first 5 rounds, Henry Allen, Adrian Jimenez, and Lucas Malstat, all have demands below slot. We're obviously not going to sign Xavier Rivera. We picked him in the 11th round. His signability is impossible. He's looking for some crazy amount of money, but he was an 11th round pick. Who cares? So we will get the demands out there to these players, and that should allow us to meet the demand of Mr. Hod also, and will actually still come in just under the $12 million we had budgeted. So other than Hod, it was a bit of a bargain basement class here in a bargain basement draft. Don't know how well these players are going to turn out. Certainly not feeling as good about this draft as I did in the draft we did in 2023, where I felt like we got a fair amount of talent, and players kept dropping to us the next round after we were thinking about taking them. They were always kind of available in the subsequent round, which was a nice treat for us. Definitely don't feel like this draft was quite as interesting. But now it's time to pivot shortly to finding out who the Reds will have in the All-Star game. I think that Jared Kelenic is a big-time prospect, hitting .298 with 24 homers and 71 ribbies. And among our pitching staff, Nick Lodolo, who's 11-1 with a .274 ERA, would be very surprised if those 2 players aren't National League All-Stars here in 2024. And you can see Zach Wheeler banged up now with back stiffness that's going to impact him for 1 to 2 weeks. Only positive thing is that it doesn't impact his throwing, but definitely feeling like this team could be helped if we can find another pitcher to bring on over the next few weeks. And we'll take a look at the all-star rosters for our Cincinnati Reds. Nick Lodolo is expected, 11-1 with a 2.74 ERA on the team. Tyler Stevenson in his catcher, 2.65 average with 14 home runs. And Jared Kelenic, 298, 24 homers, also on the team. So we got the two that I definitely expected, and certainly when you look at the offensive season that Tyler Stevenson is having for us as a catcher, not a shock to see him make the all-star team and actually elected as a starter, as you saw with his little asterisk next to his name. Kelenic was also a starter for us, so that was nice to see a little bit of respect for the Reds, who are still competitive. Tied for second, half a game out, and we are in a three-way tie for the 3 wild card spots. Just half a game ahead of the Braves, 2 games ahead of the Dodgers. So it seems like it's going to be an insane battle, not just in the NL Central, but also for a wild card spot if we don't end up winning the NL Central. So certainly bringing some help on board over the next couple of weeks will make me feel better about our chances as the season gets closer to its end. And I definitely like to revisit Corbin Burnes with the Blue Jays. You can see they're 4th in the AL East, 10 games back, but they've won 6 in a row in 8 of their last 10, and they're only 2 behind the wild card, so they're kind of still lurking and probably not real desperate to get that contract off of the books yet. Clearly would hope that they really go in the tank over the next couple of weeks, and maybe the price on Corbin Burnes comes down a little bit, because at least when we are looking at the pitchers who are available on the trade block, there's not a lot there in terms of starters. Shane Bieber and John Gray, who are also on the list, are recovering from a torn rotator cuff and ulnar nerve entrapment, so neither of them is going to help. But if you're willing to pay their salary, their teams are willing to trade them to you. Matthew Boyd was offered to us, but with that real poor movement, don't think he would be a great fit in Cincinnati. Also just not sure even how much of an upgrade he is. He would be another lefty in our rotation, but I think an extreme fly ball pitcher who throws in the low to mid-90s with well below average movement on his pitches is probably not an optimal guy to bring on board in Cincinnati. The offer for him was very reasonable. Basically just looking for Jay Allen II, a decent minor league outfield prospect, really great fielding prospect, a lot of speed. Don't know that he's ever going to really be a major league hitter. He's hit 275 in Double-A. Probably will have him up in Triple-A next year. So not an unreasonable demand, but I just don't think Matthew Boyd's going to be enough of a difference maker for us. So maybe we can figure out something with Corbin Burnes before the deadline, but it's not going to be easy. And I'm trying to piece a trade together for Corbin Burnes using some of the advice from our last episode from Not My Four-Ply on Sacruth. Included Serta and Canchola again, added in the pitcher Connor Overton as well as Jonathan India, and had their retention down to 10% because with India and Overton we did have some major league salaries going back their way, and there's still a no way on that, not even a player that'll get the deal done for us. So I think at this point we just got to hope that the price comes down a little bit over the next couple of weeks. We are now at the All-Star break, taking a look at the standings. We're a game back, 3rd place in the Central, and we are holding on to a 3rd wild card spot by just half a game over the Braves. The Blue Jays, on the other hand, have now won 7 in a row, still 10 back, but they are right in the mix, only a game behind in the All-Star race. So the hope is that we play really well over the next couple of weeks, and the Blue Jays really fall out of contention, and nobody else swoops in on Corbin Burnes, and maybe his price comes down a little bit. seems like I'm hoping for a lot of somewhat low probability things to all happen for us to end up with Corbin Burns, but without hope, we have nothing. And the fact that we did put out that we're looking for starting pitching has resulted in some trade offers. The Royals have offered us the 27-year-old Jackson Kowar. Not a horrible pitcher for the back end of our rotation. With Kansas City this year, he's 4-5 with a 3.49 ERA, making the major league minimum. He's got 4 pitches, 3 of which are above average. Certainly a useful player thrown in the mid to high 90s. The issue is that they want Zach Wheeler in return. So that's not really a move that we can afford to make, given that once he's fully healthy, hopefully not too long after the All-Star break, Wheeler is also going to be a very important part of our rotation going forward. So appreciate the offer, but we're not going to try to do the subtraction by addition trade as far as our pitching staff and our rotation are concerned. And we lost 2 out of 3 against the Red Sox coming out of the break. We've got the Phillies and then 4 with the Cubs at home this week. I would guess that's probably our longest homestand of the season, 10 games in a row in Cincinnati. So hopefully we can do some damage against the Phillies and the Cubs, because when we look at the standings, we're now 2.5 out in the Central, and we are tied with the Mets for the final wild card spot. Blue Jays still hanging out with a 500 record, and they're only 2 games out of the AL wild card. So we've got to play really well over the next week, and we need the Blue Jays to fall apart. And even if that happens, I don't know that we're going to be able to pull a deal together for Corbin Burns. And Zach Wheeler is now out for 7 weeks with an elbow strain. So that is definitely not what we wanted to see. We're 50-44 right now. Did win the first game against the Phillies, but game and a half out in the Central. Tied for the wild card at this point with 2 other teams, but only half a game from being out of the playoffs on that front. I do have to keep in mind that ownership only wants us not to suck this year, and we're above 500. As much as I'd love to be a playoff team, I don't think we should be mortgaging our future to get there now, particularly with the fact that Wheeler now for the next month and a half to 2 months is going to be joining our former ace before he got hurt, Nola, on the injured list. We're without the 2 big pitchers we brought on this offseason. Could be a sign that we shouldn't be buyers at the trade deadline. And we certainly shouldn't be mortgaging the organization to bring on Corbin Burns. I don't like throwing in the towel, and we're not really throwing in the towel. We're just not going for it as hard as we could, but with what we've offered for Burns in the past and not even being close to getting a deal done, I just don't think there's a scenario where we can realistically bring him on board. And he is headed to free agency. Certainly would hope that if we brought him on board, we'd have a chance of getting him locked up for the future before he hit free agency. But there's no guarantees on that front. So we'll see where things go over the next week. But I'm starting to think it may end up being a relatively quiet trade deadline for our Reds. In the meantime, I am going to actually throw Jonathan India on the trade block. I don't know if anyone's going to reach out about him, but hitting .236 with 5 homers this year, due to make $5.3 million next year, and he's not really an everyday player for us at this point. and moving on from him would open up an opportunity for some of the young guys that are kind of trapped in AAA right now to hopefully contribute at the major league level. So I don't know that we're going to get any brilliant offers for him. I think we're also going to put Kevin Newman on the list right now. He's going to be a free agent after this season, and obviously his role as the starting shortstop has been supplanted by the fact that we brought on Nick Ahmed. So Newman also onto the trade block. We'll see if we get any offers on either of those guys over the next 10 days or so. And with Wheeler on the IL, we're going to move Ian Anderson into our rotation from the closer role. We're going to call up Connor Phillips from AAA to see whether he can close for us. But all-star catcher Tyler Stevenson, also now banged up with a strained oblique for 5 weeks, put him onto the IL. Will give us the opportunity to bring up Austin Hedges, who we had signed to a minor league contract to the major league team. He will certainly, with his good defense, help our pitching staff on the margin, but certainly would think at this point with undoubtedly our top 2 starters, Nola and Wheeler, our starting catcher, one of the top young players in our system, Encarnacion Strand, and probably the top young starting pitcher in our organization, all on the injured list here as of July 25th, and only potentially Hunter Green and maybe Encarnacion Strand likely to be back before the end of August. We probably don't want to be going crazy trying to bring on players to play for this year. Again, we're not waving the white flag, we're not surrendering, but we also want to be rational about what the team is, and I don't think, as we're currently constructed with the amount of talent that we have on the injured list, that we're 1 or 2 players away from being a true contender. And as we head into the last couple of days before the trade deadline, we're 2.5 out in the division, 3rd place, still hanging on by a thread to that final wild card by just half a game over the Mets. I don't think it makes sense for us to chase after Corbin Burnes anymore as a 2-month rental. With both Nola and Wheeler on the IL, we're just going to have to accept that our pitching is not going to be what we had hoped it would be. We're still 1st in the National League in starters ERA, 7th in runs allowed, though, as our bullpen has been really rough with the worst ERA in the league. 4th in runs scored. We're a game below Pythagorean expectations. Still have a chance of finally having another 500 or possibly a winning month in July, which would be the first time since April, after we had losing records in both May and June. We've got, I would guess, 3 games left, or only 2 games left. Actually, no game today at Kansas City for 2 in a row on Tuesday and Wednesday till we get to the trade deadline. So if we win both of those, we could have a winning record for the month of July. But I think right now what I'm going to do is kind of shop some of those players that we put on the trade block. Kevin Newman, Jonathan India. We're not going to get a frontline starting pitcher for either of them, but if we can bring up someone who can help us for the long term, particularly in the case of Newman, he's only looking for $5.5 million a year, but he's a utility guy for us at this point. We've got a lot of infield talent in the organization right now and waiting to come up and get a chance. Might as well just see what we can get for him. I don't necessarily think it's going to be overwhelming, but let's just see prospects. Anything? Bueller? Anyone? Bueller? Not exactly the top prospects in baseball history, that's for sure. And I don't really see how Lucas Giolito is considered a prospect, but we've got him offered. He would be a starting pitcher in the final year of his deal. Paul Blackburn, I'm assuming, is also, the final year. No, he's actually arbitration eligible next year to make about $9 million. He's a decent major league pitcher, but not all that exciting. Might as well just shop India while we're here and see in terms of prospects anything interesting for Jonathan India. A very similar looking list of options. So nothing too exciting. If we package those two guys that we're probably just going to move on from together, anything going there, not just even looking at prospects. Just give us a body. Give us something. Giolito and Blackburn are still the featured players, so probably not a ton of value in either of those guys at this point, unfortunately. And we actually are going to try to make a trade here. We shopped Newman just for anybody. He's going to be a free agent after this year. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of good young infielders in our system. And we do need bullpen help. Diego Castillo of the Dodgers certainly looks like he would have a profile where he'll probably become our closer, which isn't the worst thing in the world since we just moved Ian Anderson from a closing role into the starting rotation. Had a 3.98 ERA this year. He's been bad in 2023. He was really bad between Seattle and the Cubs. But the pitching rating suggests that he could be pretty useful. Our bullpen is so bad that I don't think it hurts us. We're not going to have Newman at the end of this year anyways. We may not have Castillo. I'm guessing he'll be looking for a decent chunk of change. And it says they won't even consider accepting this deal, but that was what kind of came up. So we'll at least submit the offer and see what they think. I don't think it's going to move the needle all that much for us, even if we are able to do it. But at least we'll get a player that helps our bullpen, and we've got plenty of infielders down in AAA who are basically ready to come up and help at the major league level. So if we move on from Newman and or India, that'll help give some of those guys an opportunity. And we've actually got a couple of interesting options that we can pursue with Jonathan India as well. One is Mitch White of the Blue Jays. He's really a borderline starter. He's got a 5-pitch arsenal, a couple above average, a couple average, and then a below average changeup. He's in the closer role for them right now, although he has also started 8 games this year. Over 55 2/3 innings. He's put up a 4.37 ERA. Certainly not a great pitcher, but somebody who I think could help us more than India would. So we're going to go ahead and submit that offer and see what they think. But the other option in this one is, you'll know why it's more interesting to me when you see it. If I could think and go back to shop a player. All right, I'll shop India again. I'm sure it will be the exact same list as before. I've got plenty of shop attempts today. But those of you who have been watching me over the years know that I am a Yankees fan. And option from the Yankees is Clay Holmes. The issue is that he's signed to an extension where he's going to be making $7.5, $8.5, and $10 million. So a pretty expensive reliever at this point, but a very productive reliever who could help us. I don't know how realistic it's going to be to get him for India. I mean, it says that they'll consider the trade. Yes, of course we should pull the trigger. So that kind of tells me that there's no way that they're going to do this. Oh, wow, they can't retain a lot of his contract. It looks like the Yankees are in some financial difficult straits there. Well, what if we add in Connor Overton, who we don't really care about? Yeah, they just won't be able to retain much of his contract. I don't think. I don't know why the Yankees would do this, except that they're just apparently in a real difficult contract situation at negative $37 million. I don't know how the Yankees could have messed that much up over 18 months. Taking a look at the team there, and minus 36 million in haven't really changed their roster all that much. It's all familiar, and I guess they got Nick Senzel now after we traded him. Yeah, it's just Judge, Cole, Stanton, Rodon, Sevy, Rizzo, LeMahieu, Frankie Montas, Michael King, Nestor Cortez, Bader, Germán, Trevino, Holmes. I don't know how they got themselves into that much of a mess financially. It is what it is, though. I'll take on the contract. I don't think they're going to do the deal, but let's just throw it out there and see what they say. So at this point, we're just throwing spaghetti up against the wall and seeing what happens. I don't really understand that analogy, by the way. What exactly are we supposed to do by throwing spaghetti up against the wall? That's just going to make a mess. I don't think I was trying to say that I'm trying to make a mess out of this. I think I was just trying to say that I'm willing to try a lot of crazy things and see if any of them strike a chord with the other general managers. And adding to our ultimate need to move on from India and or Newman is that Encarnacion Strand is ready to come back, which is really good news. Going to have to send Matt McLain down right now, who was certainly competent at the major league level, hit 269 and 108 at-bats for us. He's basically ready at this point. We can force start him down in AAA and get him a little more polished at some of those defensive positions. But certainly would like to have him back sooner rather than later. So quite honestly, if we can get something decent for India and or Newman, it's probably time to move on from both of those guys, because at the very least that will open up the opportunity for us to get McLean back. But then keep in mind, we also want to get Marte and Ellie De La Cruz back up here, or up here for the first time. Before the end of the season as well. So we want to remain competitive. We're not throwing in a towel, but we're going to see if we can pick up a little bit of value for some of those veterans and maybe open up a spot for some of the young guys. And we've got 3 almosts to our trade offers. The question is almost throw in a scrub minor leaguer, or is almost add in Jared Kelenic to the trade and it's done? So let's find out. With the Dodgers, that was Newman for Diego Castillo, and it looks like we can get that deal done. They're not looking for much else in return. So I think we're definitely going to go ahead and make that trade. The interesting thing is what we're going to be able to get potentially for Jonathan India. Yeah, the Blue Jays said almost, but it's pretty big-time prospects or big-time major league players. Nick Ahmed, Sal Stewart, one of the top prospects in our system, Matt McLain, Friedel. But there's some people in there that we might be able to throw in. And then the Yankees, we can actually We can get Clay Holmes, so that's going to be the interesting decision. Which way do we want to go? I don't know that I love the fact that they can only retain 10% of his contract, so we're going to be spending $6.5, $7.5, $9 million on a closer for the next 3 seasons. But the argument to do it is you simply look at our team statistics and that. Oh, sorry, I'm still looking at the Yankees. Why didn't you tell me I was doing that? Still looking at the worst bullpen ERA in the National League and bringing on a guy like Holmes for the next couple years, particularly if we're able to bring on Castillo now, would give us a situation where the bullpen should be better, not just this year, but into next year with Holmes as well. So got something to think about, but I think we might make a couple of trades here. And we are going to go ahead and send Newman to the Dodgers for Diego Castillo. We are going to include 23-year-old minor league right-hander Jefferson Lopez recovering from a torn rotator cuff. He's only made it as high as A ball. So we're going to add Jefferson Lopez, and we are going to go ahead and complete that trade to bring Diego Castillo on board. So we're going to obviously be doing a lot of shifting. Presumably we're going to make one more trade right here, so I'm not even going to bother messing around with our roster at this point. The question is, do we want to do the trade where we bring on Mitch White, who could be a back-end starter and or bullpen arm for us for the next few years? He's just heading into his arbitration years. Do I want to pick up him for Jonathan India? Or do we want to bring on Clay Holmes, who would definitely take over as our closer? You look at the stats over the course of his career, well above average ERA plus and FIP minus. Has really blossomed into a big-time pitcher ever since he came to the Yankees from the Pirates. But it's a lot of money for a closer for a team like the Reds, but it's also by far the most talented pitcher in our bullpen where we need some talent. And I can definitely see there being an argument to bring on Mitch White, given that we've struggled in that back end of the rotation, particularly the 5th starter this year. But as I talked about, we have moved Ian Anderson into a role now. Obviously, Clark Schmidt is still an issue. But we will have Nola back next year. We may have Wheeler back for the last week or 2 of the season this year before he hits free agency. And I feel like if we bring Holmes on board, that definitely puts us into a position where Ian Anderson is part of the rotation for the next couple of years. And he's probably a similar-ish pitcher in terms of his potential production to what we'd be getting from a Mitch White. I think we need difference makers on this team, and I feel like Clay Holmes is more of a potential difference maker, even if he's a guy who may only be pitching 70, 80, 90 innings a season. He gives us something that we don't have right now, as opposed to a generic 4th or 5th starter. So we're going to go ahead and invest a little bit of money. We're going to include Reynaldo Cruz, add him to the deal, and we are going to go ahead and chip away India, Overton, who we just want to get off the roster, and Reynaldo Cruz to the Yankees for Clay Holmes. And now we've got a couple of openings in our infield to start bringing up some of that young talent that I've been talking about. And David Bell actually wants to use Diego Castillo as our closer. We are going to overrule him on that. We are going to force Clay Holmes into our closer role, since he's the guy who's going to be with us for multiple seasons. And then Castillo and Brett Martin will be our setup guys. Brule, Cruz, Diaz, middle relievers. Ashcraft is a long reliever. And Sam Martin back is our lefty specialist. Lodolo, Inoa, and Wells, who have all been really good this year, along with Ian Anderson, who's moving from the closer role into the rotation. And then Clark Schmidt's going to remain our number 5 for the time being. But that's the way the pitching staff is going to look, at least over the near term. And with the departures of India and Newman, definitely open up an opportunity for some of those youngsters to come up, which we wanted. Certainly the first one back is going to be Matt McLean. And now it's just a matter of figuring out whether it's Noel V. Marte, hitting .279 with 22 homers this year in AAA. Certainly not much left for him to prove at this level. Or Ellie De La Cruz, hitting .264 with 25 homers. Similarly, not much left for Ellie De La Cruz to prove at this level either. I think De La Cruz is the number 14 prospect in baseball, and we've had him in Louisville now for over a season and a half. He doesn't really have anything left to prove there. We've been trying to train him a little bit all over the place. You can see it looks like he can play right, first, or third for us now. If we have to have him learn another position in spring training next year, we'll certainly do that. But we are going to use the opportunity of trading away Newman and India to move up the top prospect in our farm system, Ellie De La Cruz, to the big club. And it's probably not the best thing in the world for a couple of our players. Will Benson hitting .241 with 16 homers and 253 at-bats. And Spencer Steer hitting .230 with 11 homers and 300 at-bats. Who now, with the shifts that we're making, are going to see their regular playing time gone. But we're going to give these guys a chance. McLean's going to be our starting third baseman. Ellie De La Cruz is actually going to be our starting right fielder, taking over for Benson. We're going to see what Cabrera can do. We're going to see what Mountcastle can do playing every day. And Encarnacion Strand's still going to get some playing time. Ahmed, obviously, at short. A little playing time still for Abreu, Kelnick, and Friedel in the lineup every day. And then, obviously, Hedges will be our catcher. So feel like we've gotten the roster younger, feel like we've improved the bullpen, and we haven't really given away any prospects. So I think it's been a interesting trade deadline for our Reds. Don't know that it makes us any more likely to make the playoffs, but I don't think it makes us less likely to make the playoffs either. And I think we're at least starting to turn the roster over to some really young players with a lot of potential who aren't making as much money as the guys that we traded away. And we've also potentially brought on a guy who can be our closer for the next 3 seasons. And as we move to the month of August, Wilyer Abreu named the National League Rookie of the Month. 329, 5 homers, 16 ribbies. You may remember this is the Rule 5 guy we picked up from the Red Sox. Had a monster year for them in AAA last year. Really between AA and AAA, 33 homers and a batting average well over 300. Hitting just .249 for us. Does have 19 doubles and 9 homers and 309 at-bats. Better than average in terms of his OPS plus and his WRC plus. Certainly looks like someone who could be an interesting player for us in the coming years. So good to see him be productive. Also good to see that we did get those final 2 wins against Kansas City at the end of the month. So that meant that we finally had another winning month after that great start to the season in April. Hopefully helps us kind of stabilize things. We're fourth in the league in runs scored as we head into August. Sixth in the league in runs allowed. Still the best starting pitching and the worst relief pitching in the league, which is a bit surprising given that we've lost Nola for the whole year as our ace, and Wheeler is on the IL right now as well. So pitching has been better than anticipated, at least in terms of the starters. We're a game behind in the Central Division, and we're up a game and a half on both the Mets and the Braves for the third wild card spot. We're in this 2-hole right now. So things could definitely be worse. Didn't make a huge trade at the trade deadline, but we also didn't completely denude our farm system to bring on someone that was just a rental. I think it was good to move on from India and Newman. We'll see what Clay Holmes becomes for us. Obviously, wish the Yankees could have potentially retained more of his salary. But, we've made our choices. We've made our bed. Now it's time for us to lie in it and see what happens over the last couple of months of the season. Can we at least stay above 500? I think we can. Can we end up in the playoffs? I hope we can. And we'll find out the answer to those two questions in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.